Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today in the 21st edition of our CVC Insider Series. Today, we have a great session ahead with Stefan Gabriel, Chief Executive Officer of Hitachi Ventures, bringing in some very interesting thoughts into strategy and its importance in corporate venturing after a long corporate career. But before I get started, I wanted to quickly set the stage so you all have some context. First of all, my name is Alba. I'm part of 500 Startups. 500, we are the world's most active seed stage investor with over 2,500 direct investments into startups from 75 countries. And within 500, I'm the head of Global Innovation Strategy, where I work closely with corporate investors and innovators to power their own innovation initiatives. And we started the CVC Insider event series as a part of our efforts to help raise the bar around corporate venturing and build a more stronger, more supportive ecosystem for startups and investors alike. Every 2 weeks, we host this roundtable featuring some top corporate venturing practitioners and sharing their unique journey into CVC, specific challenges they faced, best practices that they gained along the way. So if you or somebody in your network would like to nominate for a series, please do let us know. And our host, Nicolas Sauvet, will be moderating our discussion, but there's also a Q&A function. So feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A, and we'll try our best to cover them. So now that you know what's going on, I'm going to hand it over to Nicolas. Please take it away.
Thank you, Alba, and thank you 500 Startups for this really good series about corporate venturing and interviewing top practitioners in the corporate venturing ecosystem. Today, I'm actually really excited to have Stefan joining us. I had many discussions with him about corporate VC and the strategic value and best practices. So I know we are going to learn a lot. Stefan, if you don't mind giving maybe 5 to 10 minutes introduction about your personal journey into corporate venturing and what you find most exciting.
Well, my career started when I was studying mechanical engineering within BMW. I was in charge of a lot of manufacturing processes, strategy for powertrain, new car concepts. It was always about anticipate the future of innovation, what kind of technologies would influence cars, what kind of ecosystems would be the key driver for new car concepts. And during this career, I was then one day asked by 3M to join and start a venture arm. So that was not planned. This came just by occasion because we were at that time looking into what is outside of automotive, right? What other technologies exist. And this opportunity was, of course, a great start into a completely different world, the world of corporate venturing. I was running the corporate venture arm of, so I built this one. I was running that for several years for 3M, which is a multi-company having so many disciplines, so many interests, so many products, that it became a global business to really embrace open innovation, to look into the future and find out what is the right fit, what is the right startups that would contribute to 3M. After some time and some success and a lot of awards in innovation, I left 3M and started working with a lot of other Fortune 500 companies and even looked into the CVC world. As that time I was starting to become a business angel myself. So I invested my own money in exciting startups, helped them to grow and to advise them to some growth and execution of their business plans. So after some time, I was again asked to run a big venture arm. This is the venture arm of Hitachi. And now after having learned how American corporates work, how German corporates or European corporates work, I found that very intriguing to really look into this kind of Japanese culture, one of the biggest, so the biggest industrial conglomerate, number 6 in size, having all these challenges, what other industrials have in social, environmental, and health topics, and to identify for them for this company, what is the startups that would add value to this great endeavor and to grow and to bring and to add to R&D, which is at the end what I found out needs to be a very much more strategic approach. So I would stand for strategic corporate venturing, and this is what I have been dealing with the last 2 decades almost. The strategic interest in venturing for corporates is the much bigger one than the financial interest. And this has a lot of implications, and I hope we can talk about these later today.
All right, thank you, Stefan. Maybe I want to double click on, you say it was completely unplanned opportunity to join 3M, but clearly you must have grown your career in BMW in a way that you became attractive for 3M to reach out to you. Can you talk about what it is that you did at BMW that prepared you well to be the head of 3M Ventures?
For example, when I was running the innovation field of new car concepts, what you have to do is, you know, besides big R&D, I think in BMW were something like 9,000 people looking into opportunities of the future. You need to embrace all disciplines within the company. It's not enough to look into what engineers like to do, you know, engineer the next product, the next engine, a diesel engine or whatever, and think from there. But we met involving and thinking about new car concepts. We met a lot of interesting people, right? Actually, there are other adjacent industries that influence, and this is the speciality about venturing as well. Innovations arise at the border or at the interface between different industries, right? So innovation in cars came from the consumer electronics business, or from surface and smart material companies, or there was the need to manufacture or to produce cars in a completely different way. So all of this huge complexity made it mandatory to look into startups, look into smaller companies. And it's not only startups, it's just niche experts, right, in specific areas that know something what you don't know as a big conglomerate, as a big BMW. And but this will guide you. And so this is this jointly looking into the glass bowl. This is what is left even today. You know that, right? We all try to align, and we try to embrace and to anticipate how will the future look like. And besides, there are plenty of challenges. Today, these environmental challenges that we have, right? So it's not possible with whatever resources, whatever organic R&D you have available, and what kind of money you need to invest to do that yourself, right? You need this huge network of experts. You need these challenging discussions about strategies, about scenario thinking, how markets develop quickly, right? And to be fair, right, R&D in a lot of big corporates is not fast enough to keep the momentum of what's happening in startup world. This is why corporate venturing and strategic corporate venturing is an exciting tool to foster developments and to embrace outside-in innovation.
So there are two things you said which I smiled, because that's what I use as analogy for when I propose TDK Ventures as a project. You mentioned this is one tool among many things, but also it's a glass ball, which helps to see the future. Can you share a bit about how a corporate VC should act as a glass ball?
So yes, so I think this is maybe you know that, Nick, this is the differentiator when I talk about strategic corporate venturing, right? What is the need of corporates, right? Corporates are very big. They have a lot of hierarchy. They have huge budgets, but they concentrate on their core business. But disruption And innovation does not happen in the core business only, right? And this is maybe an area where you should know what you are doing, right? Your core business, but disruption comes from adjacent areas, from the outside in. So when I talk about strategic venturing, I talk about the strategic need for corporates to somewhat improve. And there's multiple topics where you can learn, but some of the biggest is for a corporate venture arm looking into other territory, into different regions even, right? It's important to translate their finding into first of all, a strategic fit to your corporate, right? What is it that could add value in your corporation? So getting to know that, you first need to start with understand your clusters, right? So Hitachi, for example, has 5 big sectors: industrial, energy, mobility, IT, and smart life, while smart life is smart building, smart city, and even health. So there's a lot of sectors, and these sectors have subclusters. And I would say, clusters are like, environmental clusters are like, for example, zero carbon, circular economy, wastewater, things like that. In healthcare, we have precision medicine, and a lot more. So we have maybe 70 clusters. And to understand these clusters and what is driving these clusters or markets, right, or small ecosystems, right, you need a lot of know-how, right? And this know-how you need to collect because you need to anticipate and you need to produce scenarios to understand what should be your business development strategy, right? What is important technologies you need to own? What is technologies you need to use? What is tools you need to have? What is your product strategy? What is your quality strategy? What are, even not today, it's not only about products. It is about solutions. It's in the digital world, it's more solutions than products. So you need to anticipate and you need to testify that, right? And or let's say to experiment, right? Working with startups enables you to look into much broader universe of technology and of offerings in this space and experiment early stage before you would invest millions or billions in relevant R&D developments or in relevant business building, right? And even M&A, right? So corporate venturing can abbreviate R&D activities, right, or R&D cycles. And I think there's a need for speed in a lot of developments because this world has become so complex that we all need to speed up. And it's about competition, right? And there are so many solutions, so many opportunities for solutions. You need to find out what is the right pathway and experimenting in this area, experimenting on a low risk level is much more useful than to rely on organic R&D and go this pathway to heaven, what you think is the right thing to do. So looking to the glass bowl from different perspective makes a lot of sense. I have a lot of learning from 3M on this space when we were, for example, jointly investing into startups. For example, with ABB, right? In the case of water monitoring, we made an investment, and Girish, right, who was then the CEO of ABB Ventures, to invest in a company, but look into this similar glass bowl, what's happening in water monitoring, water management technologies from 2 different angles. 3M had a membrane business and Filtrete and a lot of residential water technologies, while ABB was in the automation business. So suddenly you jointly look into the same glass bowl, see something different, can talk about it, but at the end of the day, it's a benefit for both corporates, ABB and 3M at that time. And there are multiple topics like this. This is why you would jointly look into the glass bowl makes a lot of sense, right? And I think startups are very agile, right? They mostly have great expertise in a specific niche that you don't have. They look much more global than you would do. Because it's an adjacent area which is not your core, and you are not even benchmarking in all of these topics. It's not possible. So they help you to look into this glass bowl and experiment in new territory, right? And it's not only new territory, it's sometimes quite obvious, but it's so complex that you need someone with guidance. So working with startups, for me, always is a win-win to both sides, right?
Yeah, very nice. I will use maybe a pun here, which is, I think this crystal ball analogy crystallize what is a mission of a corporate VC. It makes it very clear what it is, which is about, like you said, these experiments or bet on the future and try to see which ones will work out or not. Yeah. Some of our audience are people who are probably like you were in BMW, they've maybe 2 decades in the same company and they're thinking about jumping to corporate VC. One path is, of course, their own company's corporate VC, but some could consider doing like you did. Can you tell them what do you think they should watch out if they want to do that jump? And what is the thing that they should really plan for?
Well, this is a really difficult question, and of course, it depends a lot on their own mindset, right? It's a similar question to ask, you know, which startup would fit to a big corporate, right? In some way. So what I observe is that the most of the startups, and you know, when you talk about this huge offering of startups. There are really always highly skilled people in specific niches with specific interest and appetite and experience in specific areas. So not all of those, right, are ideal for startup investments by a corporate, right? One thing is that we need to look into the strategic fit. Right, this is the first. The second is, how do you work, or how do we call it collaboration? How do you collaborate between a business unit and a startup? This is what we've tried to facilitate, and that is not easy, right? Mm-hmm. Corporate culture meets startup culture, which is very different, right? And you should not try to change either of those, right? Don't change the corporate culture. Maybe a little bit, right? Speed them up, but don't change the startup culture. This is really entrepreneurial and mostly high speed. Maybe you can give some guidance. So this is vice versa learning, right? So this is what we understand as a venture arm as well. We try to help these startups to execute their business plans, to be a good advisor, to be a good investor, whatever that means is different expectation, but it's not monitoring only, right? It's really advising, and this is advising on a team, on technology, on IP, on facing big problems. This is facilitating collaboration, what I just said before. Collaboration is so important because what can corporates offer to startups? Well, you can offer real customer projects, right? You can offer experimenting in a new territory, mostly in new regions, right? So this is, we are Hitachi Ventures. A lot ask, you know, well, we would be interested to grow into Asia or Japanese region, right? We are American startup. So how do we do that? So this is things where corporates can help a lot because they have this experience, they have huge customers, right? They have mostly big R&D arms. So there's a lot of IP support. Sometimes it turns into co-development. Sometimes it turns into just licensing or into joint projects. So if someone wants to wants to jump into this area, right? He's not a finance guy. He's someone who has technical interest, expertise, judgment, right? you were asking, what would you recommend to people who want to start in a corporate venture capital career? That's what I understood, right? So what do you tell them? Well, it's a life. You need to understand how corporates work. I think I've inhaled that 100%, right? With the corporates I've worked with. And you need to understand and you need to accept the culture, right? To gain trust in this business is one of the key topics, right? Without any trust, you will be asked hundreds of questions. Why do you do this? Why do you invest in that? So it's a very entrepreneurial job that you do, right? And well, finance expertise is financial expertise is one, technical expertise, technically opportunity to analyze, right? Understand how startups work. What do they need, right? Is something that is much more required than anything else, right? And on the other hand, it is really, you are like the diplomat working between startups and the business units who have clear budget, clear plan. They have their hierarchy. You need to know whom to talk to on which level. This is something you need to speed up, right? And if someone feels comfortable in this area, that's a good job, right? If you want to be an engineer and develop something, well, be an engineer. Go do your own startup or work in a big corporation, right? That's the difference.
Very nice. I will talk about the diplomat analogy later, but I want to ask one last question about your personal journey. Something that comes across from everything you said so far is collaborate with startup, engage with startup. You even invested in startups when you were a business angel. And even then you say it's not just the investment, it's how do you help them grow? And so one of my question is how much of this experience of collaborating early at BMW, then 3M where you invest in startups, then you become a business angel and you interact with Fortune 500 in corporate venturing, how all of that shaped how you are shaping Hitachi Ventures today?
Well, all of my learning, and this was the same in 3M, by the way, all of my learning is that there are specific processes in big corporates that you need to accept, right? You will not be able to change a culture of 400,000 people, big industrial company, right? Right away. But what I think is what you can do is you can cherry pick in specific technologies, show what does it mean to partner with startups. Collaboration is partnering, right? It is listening to what they do, how they approach new markets. What is their business plan? They work with budgets completely different to how corporates work with budgets, right? They start with strategy first. This is something that I learned a lot, right? Don't just start, right? When you build a startup and a business plan, you need to have a plan first, right? You need to exactly have a plan. Well, we all know most of the plans are over-exaggerated, right? And startups sometimes think, oh, they can do all themselves. But we know that after 18 months, life is changing, right? They take a lot of time with fundraising and other stuff other than what they intended to do. And some overestimate their entrepreneurial skill set, right? And so it's not ideal to have 3 engineers starting a startup, right? It's you need all aspects, right? And this is what we look into, right? When we observe startups, we look into the market. So you need to understand the market. You need to have the technology. This is mostly what every startup perfectly is aware of. You need to have a sexy business plan, right? So not every product generates revenue, right? It's some are nice to have, but they are not really interesting business plans. Then you need to have a good team, right? And number 5 for working with a corporate VC is you need to somehow imagine the strategic fit to this company. What value can you add of what this corporate does not know, right? So this is a giving and taking. This starts with a strategy by the startup. This implicates that the corporate has a strategy. Not all corporates have a clear strategy on every business that they are driving for the next 10 years, right? They might have a plan or a business plan for the next couple of years, but maybe not the next 10 years, right? And this is where disruption happens. And so they need to be aware, and you need to challenge this journey and be aware of how you work.
Very nice. A few things that we have in common. The one is that we both work for a Japanese company, big one, Hitachi and TDK. Mm-hmm. Both of us are not in Japan or Japanese. Mm-hmm. TDK, one of the core values of TDK is trust. And you keep saying trust is key, especially for corporate venturing. Can you tell me what it is that you find the most helpful in the Japanese culture to do corporate venturing well?
In the Japanese future?
Japanese culture.
Culture. Yes, sorry.
My accent is French, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I must say, you know, after working with American company, very tough, very energetic, very demanding, right? I think that from a technical perspective, right, the culture of a Japanese and a German company in our industry is very similar, right? They are highly skilled people, real experts in what they do. Maybe from a cultural perspective, Japanese companies have a really strong hierarchy, right? It's difficult to pass in the hierarchy. What is good for Hitachi Ventures, we are connected to the board. We have a advisory board, let's say advisory board, a sounding board, like BMW would call that, where we can talk, where we can exchange on strategic level. This is very helpful. And all of this activity was wanted by the CEO, right? And by the former CTO, who really initiated Hitachi Ventures and asked me to come up with a concept. How would I do that? Because Hitachi had some history in venturing before, and now we are doing that completely different, right? This journey just started 2 years ago operationally, but the concept was created maybe 4 years ago already. So we were thinking, how would we do that different? Just embracing Japanese culture, right? So, for example, I was asked, you know, Stefan, where would you start, right? And when I said, you know, I will start out of Germany, that was not because I live in Germany. This is because I think a real big hotspot for corporate venturing in the industry and in automotive and in, for example, today, now in environment. Well, Germany, Europe is a great place to start. You don't need to be in Silicon Valley always, right? And that was the same in 3M. You don't need to be where the headquarters is, right? Because in the headquarters, you have all of the EVPs, a lot of the center of R&D. So they will scan this market, right? What's happening there, which does not mean that we don't look into Japan. Of course, as well, we look into what's happening in Silicon Valley, right? So, but I think to spread your knowledge and your observation will help you a lot to identify more competitive topics, maybe even the same technology for a cheaper price, right? The same skill set, right? Less living costs in Europe than in Silicon Valley. Well, this might change over time, right? We will see. But I think this is good. And all of this was wanted and accepted. So there was a lot of trust. Of course, I have a long history in corporate venturing. I've built 5, 6 corporate VCs or restructured or helped to restructure them. But I made that part of my passion as well. So I think that you know that I'm a visiting professor in Huddersfield University in UK. Yep. So I'm teaching innovation and entrepreneurship, and I think this is really what needs to be done. I would like to enable a lot of more corporates, and that's what I'm doing always, right? I try to try to talk to the mid-size, to the big German Mittelstand, for example, right? To encourage them to start venture activities, right? Embrace innovation through startups and help them to get them financed, but help them to execute their technology and their solutions, right? So I think I've met in Japan, in Hitachi board, in Hitachi C-level, all of these people who wanted that, right? And this is the journey that they all are highly supportive, right? We have great conversation about the future and about how venturing can help, but it's cherry picking only, right? The budgets are in relative to big M&A acquisitions very small, right? But we have a small team. We are very lean. So we exactly translate what do we think makes sense, testify that or experiment in these new areas. And the more we talk, the better we understand what are the gaps. This can be gaps in the technical roadmap. This can be business models, what Hitachi tries to better understand. This is helping to build AI platforms in digital health. This is facing environmental challenges and come up with solutions. You know, you don't find that with a big R&D company, R&D department. You find that with a small, agile, being everywhere, venture arm, connecting to all hotspots. And what I think is very important, and this is how we get to know each other, Niklas, right? Connect with a community of CVCs, yes. Right? Not only VCs, right? VCs is one topic, CVCs is the other topic, right? They all have a similar interest, right? Think about our Global Energy Council, where we right now start to discuss what are the topics in environment or energy that will drive and that will change big corporates. You know, we have maybe 5 mining oil and gas companies. They all have a big target to change the whole corporation, right? And in Hitachi, that is similar. Hitachi wants to be more open for American and European business, right? And wants to better understand these customers in these regions, because it's not a Japanese, it's a Japanese company by origin, but it's a global operating a company facing all the global challenges that we all have. And this is what we share. Niklas, we have the same challenges, right? Think about zero carbon, right? How to get this done, right?
So I was interviewing Shinma from Total Ventures 2 weeks ago. And one thing she said, which I read in other places, was half of the technology to get us to this zero target are not yet invented. And corporate venturing is going to be critical to enable, support these technologies we need, but we don't have yet created.
Yeah.
So one word you used, which I really want to go into, is diplomat. And diplomat, I find, could be in so many things of what you said. You haven't used the word empathy, but it comes across in everything you said about entrepreneurs and startups. But it's also, and in TDK Ventures, we call it startup liaison, like liaison attachée. Yeah. So it kind of touch with a diplomat ID, but diplomat needs to have a clear view about the strategy of the mothership, the country, and at the same time know how to negotiate and to make sure that everything is a win-win. And you talked about engagement with BUs, where you don't try to change either. I think it would be foolish to think you can, or very quickly. But this diplomat analogy, I think, is really good, and I want to double click. Can you give some ideas about best practices on enabling these communications between teams in Hitachi and startups where they think very differently?
Yeah, very good. So, well, I said that in the beginning. First of all, we needed to start and to deep dive into these clusters and understand the strategies, if existing, for Hitachi ourselves, right? So to be able to scout out, and this is what we do. We proactively scout out. We can't look into, with a team of 10, we can't look into some 1,000 startups. Well, we look into 1,000 a year, right? We evaluate 100 and invest in 7 or 8 a year, maybe 10. And So this is a process. And to select these startups, you always need to understand what are the gaps. So you need some kind of collaboration, some kind of learning from the business units. So what we do is, in parallel to our venture arm, we have a corporate venture office. This is an office of highly connected people in the organization who take our startup ideas, where we explain what are they doing, what is their USP, what is their business model, how would they work. We talk with them every week. They scout out into the huge organization, because a lot of startups have multiple touch points in the organization, right? And we carefully find out what is the interest of these business units to work with startups, or sometimes even R&D to work with startups. There's a lot of learning, of course, right? And of course, you have all of this, you know, that not invented here. Well, we do the same on the, but different. This is not interesting. This is not mature enough. You have all of these, right? But I think the more we deep dive into the dialogue, right, and the more we understand, we more and more hear that business units already have heard about some of these startups, right, and are excited, but they have no opportunity to connect, right, because of their core business and of course of their budget limitations. So we add something which is widening their horizon, right? And during this R&D process, they always need to add technologies, and just by investing in a startup, right, you get so much more knowledge, right? And if you offer to all of these startups some kind of collaboration, some kind of working on a real customer project, right? Developing a application for Hitachi on a specific area, deep diving into a specific cluster and identifying what are the good or the bad or the better business models. This is the process what the startup already has done, right? So you can clearly, this is the win-win that we want to have. So this corporate venture office helps to facilitate setting up these collaboration projects paid by the business units, right? And of course, you know, if the CEO says, we want every business unit to more embrace communication, collaboration with startups, right? Everyone is more intrigued to do that. Although, you know, that would be a far future goal to make this mandatory, right? Imagine every executive in a big corporation needs to work with one startup every year, right? This opens your horizon, right? And what we have been doing in 3M that time, we started after some time to have VPs in the businesses to become board members in startups, right? In the beginning, it's difficult to have two hats on, right? Because you have your own business and you have the startup, and you want to help the startup to execute your business plan. But after some time, you hear the opposite, because they get so much more involved. They see their own business from a different perspective, right? And they consider what is good or bad, and they give this kind of experience back to the startup. Yep. So either it's an observer seat or advisory board seat or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? It is really this strategic dialogue that you need to have, and this entrepreneurial support, right? But of course, you know, even in big corporations, not everyone working on a executive level is a real entrepreneur. A lot of people are really trying to build their business, don't care about something else. But this is the cultural clash between startups and corporate culture, right? In general, this has not a lot to do with Japan or America. This is just the big and the small one, and this kind of partnering and this kind of trust that you need to build. There are people who can do that very well. And some of them is the venture arm investors, us, The other one is those who enable and who facilitate this opportunity. This is the people working in the corporate venture office. So if you have the opportunity to build such a corporate venture office, right, promoting this process of collaboration, this is ideal, right? And this for me was mandatory to start a venture arm.
And I want to double click on this corporate venturing office, because you mentioned it's paid by the BUs, which sounds really good because I have a vested interest to leverage it. What would
or R&D.
Exactly. So what would you recommend as the starting KPIs for this corporate venturing office? Because clearly what you want them to achieve is quite clear, which is win-win engagements between the mothership and the startups, but a lot is outside their control. It's in their influence, but outside the control. So what would you say are good KPIs for them to get started?
How many collaboration projects could be started between startups and corporate, right? And we have the same discussion. You know, it doesn't matter what is the KPI 20, 30, or 100, right? This doesn't matter. The significance of what can be achieved, the long-lasting relationship with the startup, even the anticipation of what they're doing, changing and helping your own business development to redirect or to challenge, right? Is what is needed. And if this is going to happen, this is already a huge success. Right, and we find collaboration projects in startups that we are invested in, and we find collaboration projects in startups where we did not invest in as well. Right, you know, it's a different topic. If we decide to invest and we are autark, we can invest in startups, even if there's not the 100% strategic fit today, but maybe tomorrow. Right, we can invest. But the decision to do a collaboration project is a different one, right? So you can have this learning even you're not invested. Well, we think that the momentum will be somewhat bigger if you have an investment and collaborate, right? And sometimes you even collaborate in multiple areas of your big corporation, because there are so many different sectors where this technology is helpful. Yes, this is. I think it's a great tool. I think it's the most important tool to collaborate or to partner with startups, really on a realistic, real project level, right?
I think you're touching on the golden nugget, which is most corporates think the corporate VC's value is learning from the startups you invest in. But actually, there are many, many engagements which will come from startups you don't invest in, but which will be a very good fit for partnership inside the company. And I like the way you described it. It doesn't matter the number of engagement. What you want is to move the needle. So it's more about the few that move the needle versus the many that don't. And that's why I was asking about the KPIs, because it's not easy to define what is the one that moves the needle.
In parallel, you always have, of course, these financial KPIs, right? And this is the expectation. We talked about that earlier as well, right? The expectation of every venture arm is that you generate some multiples of your investments, right? But this is really the second important topic. The most important topic is, imagine you identify the right startup, restructure your strategy, build and develop a great product. For example, this digital health platform that we are right now building, having done just 4 investments in this space, adding to this digital AI platform. So imagine you generate out of this a Hitachi business of 3 billion, right, in the next 5 years. Then in relative, your multiple of the investment is relative. And for the startup, of course, this is very much effective, because this will grow significantly just by Hitachi growing their business significantly as well. So this is a win-win for each and everyone.
I remember when we started TDK Ventures, I used to simplify it by saying it's a $50 million fund, and the return on investment I want is $10 billion per year revenue from a business we identify. So I Maybe I know you have an example like this, so maybe you could share an example where you did bring a real business into the mothership.
I think, Nicholas, on this topic, we need to be really careful, right? Because even though you were the initiator of such kind of business growth, right?
It's a team.
Don't talk about it, right? Because, of course, you need a good business development team. You need extra funding. You need some resources to be able to follow this journey, of course, right? I think I would not I would not stand up and say, I invested in 3 companies and built a $3 billion business. So maybe you initiated, maybe you helped to guide your corporates to the way that they were able to build and adapt the right technologies, the right business models to build that. I think this is so I think it would be too arrogant, maybe, to stand up doing that, right?
So I think I'm going to tell the audience what you're witnessing is really important, which is a humility that Stefan is showing, because I know what he's done, and his response is amazing. Which is basically it takes a team, not just inside the corporate VC, but also the business development teams, the R&D, and so on, to make this kind of new business work inside the mothership. It's a full team. Yes. So I think, Stefan, you're showing what I think we should all look for in terms of behaviors. Absolutely. I'll touch on the experiment, which is another word I really like you mentioned. You could have companies that decide to do an M&A without a corporate VC. But if you have a corporate VC, you're allowed to do this kind of very cheap experiments to learn about things and decide where you should not go and where you should go. Can you talk a bit more about best practices around how to conduct these experiments?
Well, I think I would have hundreds of examples, right? And I think if you testify in a new territory, right, a technology or business that you are aware of, that you want to replicate throughout the world, this is how you grow your corporate, right? And you are not 100% sure about your strategy, how to roll out, right? Don't do a M&A acquisition if you don't have a real clear plan. The second problem is in M&A is how does the transaction happen, right? If you want to integrate this big corporate that you are just acquiring into your company, a lot of challenges come. This is the cultural problem. This is the different IT, different processes, different governance, this all takes time. Doing a minority investment in a startup, right? And we do these below 20% stakeholding investments. We typically invest 5 million in the first stake, but we have the opportunity out of our fund to do a follow-on investment as well. So keep that easy to handle, right? This is not full risk, right? You can find out if your strategy is correct, right? You will see with the startup, jointly with the startup, what margins are possible, how does the market react, is this product or this technology accepted, right? Before you do a M&A acquisition, I would recommend almost every corporate testify or experiment with a startup in this territory and try to validate your strategy, right? And if you are not having a real strategy that is stable enough, right? Go with a startup investment first, right? Get more knowledge about what's happening in this small new ecosystem of a niche technology that you want to acquire or that you want to grow into.
And you can do that with increased confidence. Absolutely. So we talked about many strategic value, the crystal ball, these engagements with various business units. What we haven't talked about, but I know this is something that's another element of strategic value, is becoming a change agent for the company. Can you talk about maybe what you learned in being a change agent in a way that works and that really raises the bar for the company?
I think in general, the CTO in 3M always said, Stefan, reinfect 3M with the innovation virus.
Oh, that's a nice one.
This is a nice one. Well, today in Corona times, it's not a nice one. But
at the time it was okay.
But in general, I would say, well, you can give a lot of offering on a lot of opportunities, of investment opportunities, of great talent that you find in startups. Great and fast developing, new raising, changing markets and opportunities. You can give these opportunities to your corporate organization and you need this dialogue to find out what makes sense and what does not make sense, right? And maybe you're not always right, because you don't know, right? And it depends a lot of the skill set and on the opportunity to adapt something from outside. This is the whole story about open innovation, right?
Exactly.
Be open for innovation means open innovation, but this is just the beginning. You need to translate that. What does that mean for me, right? And so you can be a change agent, speeding up R&D processes, right? Looking to the outside in hotspots, try to understand, try much more to benchmark and to challenge your technical roadmap, find gaps in the roadmap, right? You can testify business models, right? Before you really invest hundreds of millions into developing your corporate into this direction. And so this is you give this outside perspective. And by the way, you will find a lot of new partners, right? And sometimes maybe even you find great people who like to work for big corporates and to execute on their business plan and bring technologies to the next level. But I always need to say that has changed, I think, significantly in our world, and you have observed that as well. When I was asked 15 years ago, by a startup, would you integrate us into your big corporate? No, we have never done that, right? Neither in 3M, nor that's the plan in Hitachi to integrate a startup into big corporate because of culture, because of lot, but to adapt the technology, even to replicate the technology and to drive that to the next level is something what is in the interest of the startup and in the interest of the corporate. So you are a change agent for being more open for innovation, but adapting and translating and maybe even more strategy first, right? I think you need to have a clear plan first and have experimented in this area, have some expertise, some knowledge, and then go for it, right?
Very nice. And something you touch about is making sure you add value to the startups. Could you give some guidance about how to think about adding value to startups? Because many people talk about it. I'm not sure so many walk the talk.
You mean Hitachi Ventures giving value to startups?
Exactly. Can you give some guidance about how you're doing it that could be useful for the audience?
Well, discussing and deep diving in ecosystems where startups are, they are, of course, always concentrating on a niche and might not understand disruptors in their own environment. They sometimes have not the capacity, the budgets to concentrate on developing really valuable assets, valuable solutions and technologies, because they always need to think about how to finance their journey, right? So you need to be a good investor means to make sure that they have the resources and the funding they need to execute their business plan to next level. Give them advice, right? Be the entrepreneur, act like you would be in their shoes, right? And try to help them. And of course, you can give all your experience of big corporations. You can give a lot of network. You can give R&D support. You can do a lot of extra funding in parallel on specific solutions that you would be interested in. And you give them access to real customers, right? Yep. Where you can really testify your solution, your product, and find out And you know, if they are struggling, you can even help them, right, to do that. So this is a win-win, and this should be for the beauty. And don't try to change the strategy of these startups, right? If they don't want that, right? If they have a different plan, right? You need to quit. You need to separate. But this is the better solution. So I think it's really a very friendly partnering, right? Adding some venture money into this game and helping them to start their journey, right? And it's not very different to what Inside Out, building new businesses, happens, right? You need the key person who's driving that to next level. To start a new business from inside out is sometimes even more difficult because they don't have this freedom, right? There's no one saying, you know, oh, tomorrow we have 10 people working on cybersecurity in this area, right? This is not going to happen. So, but this is all starting and originated by working with startups. And then if the value and if the execution is obvious, you will do that, and corporates understand that. This is our journey. That is what we do, right?
Very nice. And so Hitachi Ventures is one of your baby. You've done so many before. When it comes to decision making for investment, what was the best practices you use for building the investment committee, building the decision making?
For me, it was mandatory to be the investment committee ourselves, right? To be independent, because what I said before, there's two different topics. One is the investment, the second is collaboration, right?
Yes.
What we do is we always listen to what is the interest of the organization, of course, right? This would not be polite not to ask, right? And we are interested about their opinion because they have huge expertise in specific areas, right? And we need to know that. But we are not, we don't rely on that. We talk to outside experts. We have venture partners. We talk to industry partners. We have a huge network. So my partners I'm working with, Wolfgang Seibold, Pete Bastian, and another one joining very soon. You know, they are people who have huge experience in this area. Pete Bastian is coming from Next 47. Wolfgang has been with venture capital for many years with Earlybird, and then was working for private equity. So they have huge experience, and their goal is really to help these startups, right? We do this same due diligence every VC is doing, right? But we more try to imagine what is possible if they get the right support, right? And so this is a different thing. So, but what we always have is, I mentioned that, we have a Hitachi Ventures board. This is a board of executives from Hitachi, top level, right? And what's interesting is that we have great conversation about future strategies, about the need for specific topics. And, you know, this is, we really translate why did Hitachi wanted to start again a venture arm, adding open innovation to Hitachi, helping to align strategies, right? Even foster strategies to next level, but coping with all the challenges that you have in environmental, in health, in technologies right now, because it's not possible to do that from the inside out always, right?
Yeah.
We are a sparring partner to the top management.
Very nice. I will have my last question. We're getting to the top of the hour. And I know it's something you're passionate about. What do you think we can do and should do to raise the bar in the corporate venturing community, especially as many new companies start their CVC journey just now?
So, Niklas, we talked about that a little bit, right? I think the right setup of a venture arm is mandatory, right? And it's a precondition to become successful. But to embrace startups, to look into specific areas jointly, right? and how we do that, and to listen to what startups need, right? And to help them pursuing this journey jointly, right? Not yourself, right? Is important. I think us being members in the Global Corporate Venture Association, leadership programs, Power List, and all of these things, show that we want alignment, right? There's no competition between TDK and Hitachi Ventures, right? And there's very little competition with Next 47 or others. At the end of the day, there are so many challenges in the world. There are so many opportunities or solutions and technologies, right? Just pick those that fit the best to your future journey, right?
Exactly.
And don't compete, right? Too much, right? In venturing, you need to partner and you need to align and you need to help each other and make it success stories. The challenges are too big to do that yourself. And well, automotive took many years, like here, where the startup here, right? When some automotive corporates put their investment budget jointly together to support this important journey of a competitor to Google Maps, right? So, and there are a lot of important technologies that need huge funding, right? So, we talk about the small funding of small plants to grow, right? So don't be jealous about someone else doing a good deal in a unicorn or whatever everyone is scouting out for. Try more to align and to collaborate even between CVCs.
Thank you, Stefan. It's a great way to end this interview. Dankeschön.
Thank you. It was a pleasure as always. Niklas, I'm looking forward to discuss with you our journey and our preparation. And I think this is something as well, sending a message to COP26, right? Yes. Out of this Global Energy Council, what can venturing do, right? What can startups add to this important challenges and targets that we all face in this on this planet, right?
Yep. And I look forward to working with you.
This is a great journey. Thank you so much for the opportunity, right? And, always open to answer questions to each and everyone, right? We get huge feedback and I think we are on the right track. And I would like to help a lot of other corporate VCs to change to the better, to the more successful, as I described today.
Thank you, Stefan. Your passion is very, very obvious.
Thank you.
Bye.
Niklas. Take care to all of you. Stay healthy, right, in these challenging times.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.